Hello, my name is Alexander. I need your help contacting Alex Jones. You know the guy from the show InfoWars? The reason I need to contact Alex Jones is because there's truly a war on information when it comes to directed energy weapon attacks, also known as microwave weapon attacks. You've probably heard about these weapons in the news as being used against U.S. Embassy employees in Cuba, China, and reported to be used on U.S. soil. Well, before any news reports about these weapons being used against U.S. Embassy employees, American citizens like myself were complaining about being attacked with these weapons, and our claims were ignored and thought of as rants of a person with a mental illness, even though there is a former CIA engineer who's admitting the government is using citizens as test subjects in non-consensual human experimentation weapons testing. Let me show you what I'm talking about.
You know, late last year, several U.S. diplomats at the embassy in Havana, Cuba, and their spouses started having a variety of physical symptoms, hearing problems, and also symptoms mimicking concussions. And it was, you know, a lot of them, they weren't at the same place at the same time. The State Department sent some medical personnel down, and through investigating, it seemed that there was some kind of sonic device that was placed in their residence. And I mean, it's really serious. We don't know why it was. Officials are telling our Patrick Ottman in Havana, they don't think it was kind of eavesdropping. It was more of some kind of sonic attack, you know, attacking the brainwave.
Now to an NBC News exclusive on those alleged sonic attacks against American diplomats in Cuba. For the first time, the Cuban officials investigating those incidents are speaking out, denying their country had anything to do with it. To our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell, who went to the Havana neighborhood at the center of the mystery.
Tonight, the U.S. Embassy in Havana virtually shut down. U.S.-Cuba relations in an escalating crisis. Now 24 American embassy staff have reported mystery ailments. President Trump blaming the Cubans.
But I do believe Cuba is responsible.
Now in their first interview, Cuba's investigative team, top security officials and a doctor pushing back. Did you do it?
Without hesitation, I'm telling you no.
The colonel says they've had nearly 2,000 people looking into the charge that U.S. diplomats were targeted by a sonic weapon, suffering a range of symptoms: hearing loss, headaches, nausea, even mild traumatic brain injury.
Cuba
doesn't possess this technology. Cuba has never produced these types of weapons.
Let me play for all of you the sound that... This is what some diplomats reportedly say they'd heard. But a document the Cubans provided to NBC News says that audio was not at acoustic levels damaging to health. And this is the room? We went inside the hotel room where one of the incidents was reported. He said there were vibrations through this window. Another diplomat lived here and many others nearby. The Cubans say they interviewed more than 300 neighbors, conducted dozens of medical exams, took air and soil samples, studied insects, toxic chemicals, and electromagnetic waves. Nothing panned out.
Not even one person was sick.
Not even one person in the neighborhoods was affected the same way. What about speculation Cuban hardliners are to blame to derail diplomatic relations? They say no way. Or perhaps a third country, Russia. No other country could have done this.
We don't have definitive answers yet, but Cuba has never allowed, nor would we ever allow, our territory to be used in this way.
The Cuban doctor in charge frustrated that the U.S. won't let him talk to the American doctors on the case.
Medically, let us do it together. And let's find what is happening, because there are people that are sick. We want to discover why.
So, if this was indeed an attack, how might it have been launched?
Well, thanks for having me, Isa. You know, it is certainly a technologically feasible thing, and has been for the better part of a century, to basically fire a sound that is outside of the range of human hearing, a sound that you would not consciously absorb or hear, but that could nonetheless sort of do you damage. If you hit someone hard enough with something either very, very high or very, very low, it is possible to do that, and there are many devices that can do it. So certainly, technically, it is feasible that some sort of device could have done this.
Okay, you said there are many devices. What kind of thing are we talking about? Does it look like a radio? I mean, what are we talking about?
Yeah, there's a wide range of them. You know, the American military, the Russian military, Chinese military have all developed different forms of this. It could be anything from there's a Russian device that's about a size of a baseball that can put out little bursts, all the way up to something that would be truck mounted. But certainly it would be no problem to build something, you know, the size of roughly a box with enough power behind it to pump out either an ultrasonic sound, which is much higher than we can hear, or an infrasonic sound, much lower, the deepest bass, you know, you've ever heard go by in a car, but vastly lower than that. Pump it out and really, you know, move the liquid inside the ear and do damage to somebody.
How long would it take? I mean, I don't know if you can answer this, but do we know historically from the studies how long it would take before an individual would start to feel the symptoms or the impact of something like that?
If you hit somebody with something like 120 decibels, very, very loud, louder than a jet plane, that's enough to cause actual damage and pain. People will clap their hands over their ears, fall over, beg you to stop. That's the kind of instantaneous pain it would be. And doing that to somebody outside of their normal hearing range, again, very, very high or very, very low, could cause them pain without them really being aware of what it is. At lower decibels, when you turn down the sound, certainly military research has shown that it can cause people anxiety, it can create senses of depression, despair, all kinds of things. And if you turn it down lower than that, so it's still loud but not consciously registering in your hearing, you can induce still a certain amount of damage. If you hit somebody over multiple days and weeks and months with that kind of sound, and who knows why one would want to do this, but if you did that over time, you could certainly damage their hearing permanently in the long run.
Did you hear that? I don't think you did. I'll play it again for you.
Certainly military research has shown that it can cause people anxiety, it can create senses of depression, despair, all kinds of things.
The news says a weapon was used to attack U.S. Embassy employees' brainwaves. This technology has existed for the better part of half a century, and military research proves this technology can cause a person to feel anxiety, depression, despair, and all sorts of things. So, what type of weapons are capable of attacking the brain with invisible frequencies, causing physical and mental health attacks? Let's continue watching and see what else they're uncovering about this.
A possible explanation this morning for the mysterious symptoms suffered by 24 U.S. diplomats and their families in Havana last year, including severe headaches, ringing ears, and sleep problems. They complained of hearing high-pitched sounds that were not audible to family members or neighbors. Similar incidents that may be related were reported this year by American diplomats in China. Now, as first reported by the New York Times, a growing number of doctors and scientists say the most likely cause could be high-intensity microwave beams, which under some circumstances can trick the brain into sensing painful sounds. The State Department has not indicated who might be behind the suspected attacks. But former U.S. officials and a lawyer representing 8 of the diplomats say Russia has the technology to do it.
If everyone looks back into the 1980s, there were attacks on our embassy, then in the Soviet Union in Moscow.
Cuba says it's not responsible for anything that may have happened. Russia isn't commenting. Doctors at the University of Pennsylvania studying 21 of the victims from Cuba think some may have suffered brain damage. Doctors tell NBC News they're using a new, highly advanced MRI that can pinpoint precise changes in the brain, hoping to learn what happened.
If it does turn out to be microwaves, it means that whoever is using this device has developed a new type of technology that could potentially be used against people anywhere in the world.
So, they're saying it's a microwave weapon, a silent weapon, causing ringing ears, sleep problems, and sounds not audible to family members and neighbors, capable of attacking anyone anywhere in the world. No, folks, it's not the microwave oven in your house. These are microwave beams, meaning it's an electromagnetic wave with a wavelength shorter than that of a normal radio wave, but longer than those of infrared radiation. Scientists like Jose Delgado and others have worked on this technology since the 50s and successfully discovered how to attack the human anatomies neurotransmitters, and receivers, which relay frequencies throughout the body to properly function. And since our anatomy doesn't have a protective cover or internal firewall, we're susceptible to the effects of frequency weapon attacks. Let's continue watching the news to see what else we can learn.
As of today, 26 American embassy staffers in Cuba, one diplomat in China now are confirmed to have suffered what the U.S. government calls health attacks. Now a mother is speaking out for the very first time in this NBC News exclusive. Last year, Catherine Werner, a U.S. diplomat stationed in China, told her parents she was experiencing strange sounds and sensations in her apartment. Her health was declining rapidly.
Just struggling, and she's just a shell of what she was.
Her mother, Laura Hughes, an Air Force veteran, was so alarmed, she quickly booked a flight to China.
You notice when something's wrong with your children, and there was something very wrong with Catherine.
Laura tried replacing the apartment's air filters and buying imported food. Nothing helped. And then Laura says she started feeling it too.
We heard a very high-pitched sound in Catherine's bedroom, and we heard a very low pulsing sound in the living room. Our heads would pulse. You would feel like you would want to regurgitate. You could become instantly paralyzed, instantaneously fatigued.
Laura has also developed visual problems, including sensitivity to light, which is why she's wearing dark glasses today. It's similar to what U.S. diplomats in Cuba reported feeling, in what the U.S. government now says were targeted health attacks. As mother and daughter struggled, Laura says their dogs also began acting strangely.
They'd be shivering under the bed when we returned to the apartment. They would vomit blood. They didn't want to go back into the apartment after long walks. And they would run down the hallway and stop just where the living room begins and just sit there, and their heads would move simultaneously. We were so scared. We didn't know what could they possibly be looking at.
After 3 months, Laura, unable to tolerate it any longer, headed back to the U.S. 3 weeks later, the State Department medevaced Catherine out of China.
The doctors diagnosed Catherine with traumatic brain injury. Their findings were the same as they found for the U.S. diplomats from Cuba.
Attorney Mark Zaid represents Catherine and many of the Havana diplomats affected.
There are things that are identified in their MRIs and CAT scans as showing traumatic brain injury that shouldn't be there for people who have never had concussions.
The State Department brought in outside experts. Their findings? The victims appear to suffer from a new type of brain network disorder. Who or what caused it? A mystery.
The United States government is still not sure who or what is responsible for those health attacks,
leaving Laura Hughes and so many others in the dark.
I, too, have been diagnosed by the same doctors through the VA hospital in Philadelphia with traumatic brain injury.
In total, 16 Americans posted in China were evacuated after reporting sounds or symptoms. But other than Catherine, the U.S. says none of them are considered confirmed cases.
Some people have suggested that maybe it's all psychosomatic mass hysteria.
Science doesn't lie. These scientists and these doctors and specialists have been working very hard and long on us. There is no way you can fake this.
Have they told you or Catherine whether this is permanent damage?
Yes, it looks like it.
The NIH is now studying the syndrome, but Laura is calling on the State Department to do more.
I do not believe that our military or diplomats are safe because this weapon system is creating havoc.
And do you worry that this could happen to other diplomats in other countries?
That's why I'm here. That is why I'm here.
And Hughes is speaking out, she says, because her daughter and the other diplomats cannot without fear of losing their jobs. Many told NBC they fear the government is downplaying what happened.
In this news report, you've heard testimony from an Air Force veteran who went to aid her daughter who was complaining of being attacked with frequency weapons. And while in China, she was attacked as well. She says the effects felt when being attacked were instantaneous fatigue, visual problems, feeling the urge to regurgitate, and paralysis. She even says not even the dogs were exempt from being attacked. Notice the news reporter says victims believe the government is downplaying what happened, and accusations from some people considering this mass hysteria, as if she and other victims are making this up. So, if an Air Force veteran doesn't believe our military or U.S. Embassy employees are ready for this weapon system, what happens when citizens like yourself try getting help for attacks they're experiencing from a silent microwave weapon, which, as you've heard, can cause you to experience hearing loss, sounds no one else can hear, feeling vibrations, sleep problems, nausea, paralysis, anxiety, depression, despair, and all sorts of things? Well, here's a glimpse.
Hundreds of people in the valley say they are hearing voices in their heads. And those voices are being transmitted by microwave or other methods.
Well, several viewers asked us to investigate what they call electronic harassment. KMIR 6's Angela Monroe joins us now with what she's discovered. Angela.
Electronic harassment, synthetic telepathy, voice-to-skull technology. Chances are you haven't heard of these terms, but after searching the internet, I found dozens of websites dedicated to the phenomenon and several Valley residents who say they're victims.
How much more can you invade me than to go into my brain? It sounds like somebody else is reading the book, only it's thoughts.
We're not having a group hallucination. This is actually something that's happening.
These men all live in the area, didn't know each other before the voices started, and say someone is playing mind games with them.
Mostly it's a lot of derogatory comments about whatever you're thinking about.
Only time I ever had a whole sentence, he said, "This is not about you," which just frosted me. If it's not about me, what the hell am I going through all this for?
We sat down with local psychiatrist Dr. Alan Drucker to get his professional opinion.
There's no scientific evidence and there's no objective evidence to show that what they believe to be happening is factually true.
So what does the doctor believe is behind these voices?
Information that I found on many of these websites really confirms or is consistent with what I see in delusional disorders.
But these men disagree.
I've been to a psychiatrist and they gave me anti-schizophrenia medication and it did absolutely nothing whatsoever.
However, Dr. Drucker says delusional disorder has no real medical treatment and is believed to start because of disrupted dopamine pathways in the brain.
These pathways then start to fire or get triggered in the absence of actual stimulation of a person actually speaking or the radio being on, etc. It does tend to occur more in populations of individuals who are marginalized or in some way stigmatized in society.
But these men disagree and say police and the psychiatric community need to take them seriously. For them, the voices are a waking nightmare.
So, hundreds of people called into a news station complaining about being attacked with microwave weapons. This was 6 years prior to any news about U.S. Embassy employees being attacked with the same type of weapons. The only difference is U.S. citizens are saying, instead of just hearing sounds in their brain, they're hearing someone or people speaking to them. Is it difficult to believe a technology that can cause a person to hear sounds not audible to family members and neighbors is also capable of transmitting someone's voice to an isolated person? Victims in this news story provided patents. As evidence, there is a technology to transmit sound and voices into the brain of humans. Citizens living in Palm Springs weren't copying a news story talking about microwave weapons causing them to hear sounds, someone speaking to them who's not audible to anyone else, and also causing extreme pain. These people were actually seeking help and pre-warning the public about a real threat to everyone's freedom and quality of life, only to be viewed as mentally ill. Did you notice? The psychiatrist interviewed in the Palm Springs news story says citizens complaining about this are experiencing delusional disorder. Sounds like the claim of mass hysteria people are saying about embassy employees who are complaining about these weapon attacks. So, it seems anyone mentioning being attacked with this technology will be labeled as mentally ill. Since U.S. citizens are saying the government is responsible for the attacks they're experiencing from weapons testing, is there anyone credible to validate our claims? Take a look at this and we'll discuss it as conspiracy theory. And I believe a better name would be conspiracy or theory, but I'm not the show's producer. It was aired a month after the news story about hundreds of citizens complaining of being attacked with microwave weapons in Palm Springs. The show's host is Jesse Ventura, a former Navy SEAL and governor who's seeking a credible source to deem this a conspiracy theory or an actual conspiracy. His credible sources were former CIA employees, one of which is admitting the technology he's developed for the government is named Voice of God weapons, and it's being used against citizens to broadcast voices into their brains and cause extreme pain that he refers to as torture. This is non-consensual human experimentation. During this time, I had just finished typing years of personal experiences being attacked with this technology. I titled the book, Are You Next? I began reaching out to victims who are calling themselves targeted individuals. And honestly, after speaking to a few of them, seeing their YouTube videos, and listening in on conference calls for victims, I honestly thought they were crazy because they had so many misconceptions about how these attacks are happening. For instance, most of them believe they have microchip implants in their brain and throughout their body, which allows the technology to attack them. The majority believes they're being stalked by everyone from their neighbors and co-workers to the mailman who are hired to attack them with the technology. These misconceptions are a recipe for disaster. Watch what happens when citizens' complaints of microwave attacks are ignored and thought of as delusions of a person who's mentally ill.
This new information comes as we are beginning to learn even more about the final weeks of Aaron Alexis's life. He told Rhode Island police last month that he was hearing voices and was being followed by 3 people who were sending microwave vibrations through his body to keep him awake.
The FBI released gripping silent surveillance video of Aaron Alexis as he drives into the Navy Yard in his rented Prius. The cameras pick him up as he enters the front door of Building 197, ready for a rampage that killed 12 people before he was shot down.
There are indicators that Alexis was prepared to die during the attack and that he accepted death as the inevitable consequence of his actions.
You see him carrying his bag, hidden inside a sawed-off Remington 870, which he removed in the bathroom. Photos released today show the bag he left behind. 22 minutes after he drove in, surveillance picks him up in the hall. He readies his weapon, hunting people. You see him move downstairs and then make his way along another hall as people flee down a connecting hallway. In the 10 days since the shooting, a sharper picture is emerging of what drove Alexis.
There are multiple indicators that Alexis held a delusional belief that he was being controlled or influenced by extremely low frequency, or ELF, electromagnetic waves.
The FBI released photos of his gun with an apparent reference to the magnetic waves carved into the handle, my ELF weapon. On the barrel, the words, "End to the torment." And while the investigation into the mental illness that spawned the shooting will continue, agents said they found writings by Alexis that explained in plain language why he said he did it.
A document retrieved from the electronic media stated, quote, "Ultra-low frequency attack is what I've been subject to for the last 3 months. And to be perfectly honest, that is what has driven me to this."
This tragedy was 5 years prior to any news reports about U.S. Embassy employees. Aaron Alexis was a 34-year-old Navy reservist and subcontracted information technician for the Navy, whose complaints were similar to those of U.S. Embassy employees, in the sense of feeling vibrations, sleep deprivation, and hearing sounds no one could hear. The only difference is he complained about a person's voice being projected into his brain that no one else could hear. This was a frightening and sad day for a lot of people. Unfortunately for me, I viewed this as God works in mysterious ways. See, I told my family about my experiences of being attacked several years before any of these news stories, and it seems like it took all this to happen for them to read my book and try to understand what I was saying. Here's what my mother had to say about this tragedy.
Hello, I bring you greetings from the Midwest state of Illinois. My name is Gwendolyn Dew, and I'm the proud mother of Tyrone Dew. I guess you say all mothers are proud, so what's the difference in that? But I'm proud for a different reason. I'm proud of my son Tyrone because he has the courage and ability to bring to us the awareness of microwave torture. I did not know what microwave torture meant. When I first heard about it, I thought they meant the microwave that we cook, warm up food with. Now, that may seem silly to you, but I'm sure there are other people out there who are not aware of this technology at all. I did not know that it meant the microwaves that are going through the airwaves. Fortunately, I don't know, I attribute it to my praying a lot. He did not believe in that, but I attribute it to a lot of prayer on my part that he was able to overcome some of this. And he was able to write this book and describe the things that were going on and interview other people. And when I read his book, I began to understand it more. And then he showed me this news report that was in California where they were interviewed other people who had experienced this. When the young man at the Naval Yard did the shooting there, my heart went out to his family, his mother, because I know that people are probably saying, and she probably felt that her son had a mental illness that she knew nothing about, and probably wondered where did she go wrong in raising him and everything. I called the local news stations in my area and tried to tell them about my son's book and about what was going on and about microwave torture. None of them returned my phone call. My point of trying to get it out there was that I wanted this mother to know that no matter what you did, your son was going through something that was not explainable right then and there, that none of us would understand. And I wanted people to know that it was not the microwave that we cook with and all of that, that it is through the airwaves, that it is explained to me by someone who's been through it, my son himself, that it is pure torture.
That's my mother. God bless her. Lord only knows her grief throughout the years of dealing with my complaints, trying to explain what's being done to me. She attributes me remaining rational and typing my book to her prayers. I didn't believe that was the case, because for several years, I didn't want to hear shit about God. I mean, would you? After being tortured and caused to behave in ways you never would, all your life experiences and achievements ruined, from human interaction to financial success, ending up homeless and treated as mentally ill, all because someone is attacking you with directed energy weapons, and you can't prove it, you can't protect yourself from the attacks. That was then. But now, I realize God has a plan, and I must be part of a bigger plan. See, if I was allowed to keep the hundreds of thousands I earned when I was younger, not be tortured, and my behavior wasn't modified by technological attacks, I wouldn't know the importance of raising awareness. Now, since the cause of this tragedy was never properly addressed and written off as actions of a person with a mental illness, directed energy weapon attacks continued against innocent citizens, and so did the tragedies. Take a look at this.
New details about the suspected gunman opening fire inside the library at Florida State University, filled with students cramming for exams. This chilling video from the moment of crisis, students huddled there, barricading doors with anything they could find. Those are desks there. And look at this image tonight, a book riddled with bullets. ABC's Ryan Owens now with the very latest on the shooter and eyewitnesses now revealing the horror inside.
12:25 a.m., hundreds of frightened students huddle in the halls, and from the library speakers, this chilling announcement.
There has been a shooting in the library. Stay where you are.
A lone gunman enters the library and opens fire.
I heard a man yell, "There's a gun in the library, I've been shot." And I didn't know where the voice was coming from until I looked around the desk and saw the victim holding his leg bleeding on the ground.
As the shooter stops to reload, police are already on the way.
Gunshot victim at FSU Strozier Library.
Terrified students hiding in the library stacks, barricading themselves in rooms and behind desks.
It was just panic mode. I mean, we went up, we were crammed in bookcases and crying, calling parents.
Then another announcement.
If anybody has been shot, call 911 on your cell phone.
At 12:27, a mere 2 minutes after the shooting began, the gunman flees the library and is shot and killed by police. In all, 2 students and a staff member are hit. Jason Durfus was nearly one of them. Look at the holes in the books in his backpack. He didn't even know he'd been shot at until he found this bullet. Tonight, police have identified the shooter as 31-year-old Myron May, a Florida State graduate. They say he thought the government was following him.
Mr. May had a written journal and videos where he expressed fears of being targeted and that he wanted to bring attention to this issue of targeting. Mr. May was in a state of crisis.
Tonight, 2 of the 3 people shot here remain in the hospital. 1 is in critical condition. Meanwhile, police are still not sure what drove an alumni of this school to return to campus, this time with a gun.
Here we go again. Myron May was a 31-year-old former Florida State graduate and attorney for the District Attorney of New Mexico, who the news says detailed his crisis in a video journal. Let's look and listen to a few snippets of what he says caused him to behave this way.
I'm what's called a targeted individual. There are thousands of targeted individuals in the United States of America, and we unfortunately are subjected to some pretty heinous treatment, which I'll detail in this video. My experience with a direct energy weapon, it is so frightening. One thing that they did with me is try to convince me that my neighbors were the ones who were actually harassing me. When I would be in my apartment at night, and they were very successful at this for about 2 months. 2 months before I realized that I was actually a targeted individual, or what a targeted individual even was. I would hear voices in my apartment explaining what it was that I was doing. If I went to the kitchen, they'd say stuff, "Oh, he's headed to the kitchen now," or if I went to the bathroom, they're like, "Oh, he's headed to the bathroom." And this sounds bad, but one particular time I didn't wash my hands. I'm like, "Look at him, he doesn't even wash his hands." When I was in the bathroom after I used the bathroom, this is the type of stuff that they do. And because I'm hearing these voices, I'm thinking, "Oh my God, somebody is listening to me." And naturally, you think that it's the person closest to you. So I thought it was my neighbors above me, that somehow they had installed a video camera in my apartment. And I realized that later that wasn't the case, but I'll explain in the video later exactly what that is that gave me that false belief. And it's called electronic harassment. This is by far the most creepy and frightening weapon in the stalker's arsenal. Some of this technology is detailed in a book written by Dr. Robert Duncan. This book is called Project Soul Catcher: Secrets of Cyber and Cybernetic Warfare Revealed. Dr. Robert Duncan actually designed a lot of the technology, or participated in designing a lot of this technology. And so he details it in this book. The control panel stalkers who are basically in an operations center watching the target individuals are able to monitor and induce all sorts of things in a targeted individual. So this is very freaky. They're able to manipulate a targeted individual's bodily functions, things like their pain receptors, their stress hormones, stuff like that. It is absolutely creepy. They're able to speed up a targeted individual's heart rate. And I can just explain to you what I felt. That's the most I can do, because I don't fully understand the technology. But literally, in one moment, I'm just fine. And in the next moment, I'm extremely intensely hot. And I have like this tingling feeling all over literally all over my body, where I've just been heating up, almost like I'm cooking inside, like my insides are cooking. And I broke out in a sweat. And it only lasted for like a minute or two, but it leaves you so dizzy and disoriented and just out of it that, I mean, you're frightened. You are frightened and you're wondering, like, what in the world is going on with me? To Dr. Robert Duncan, I know you probably thought at the time you were doing something good, you were doing something positive, you were on the cutting edge of research in your particular field, in your particular area of expertise. But know that you caused a lot of pain and a lot of hardship to a lot of people. Targeted individuals are tortured every single day because of what you participated in, what you helped to create. So you have a special responsibility to eradicate this. You have a special responsibility to eradicate this, to come forward and do everything within your power. I mean, honestly, man, you shouldn't get a moment's sleep until this is done, till this is dead, till this is completely eliminated.
So, that's Myron May. And as you can see and hear, in his own words, he's complaining about being attacked with directed energy weapons, causing him to hear a voice or voices speaking about him and what he's doing as it's happening. He also complained about feeling extremely hot and tingling while being attacked. Here's another mass shooting, and no one is investigating the motive. You might be asking yourself, how do citizens know the voice they hear speaking to them is from being attacked with directed energy weapons and not mental illness? Well, I can tell you from personal experiences. Whoever's doing this tells you. Yes, they tell you they're the military. They tell you what's going on in your surroundings as it's happening. They'll inflict pain, then ask if you want it to stop. Then they'll stop and begin inflicting the pain again, just so you know it's someone doing it to you. It's pretty fucked up, isn't it? Perhaps this next clip can help you understand a weapon that can precisely attack you with invisible frequencies to cause your skin to feel extremely hot and tingling. Take a look at this.
The U.S. military revealing its brand new crowd control instrument that could also protect U.S. ships from pirates, the very intrepid. Peter Ducey volunteering to test this thing out, Allie.
And no, he was not the guy doing the shooting. He was actually shot at, and Peter's going to tell us what it felt like and show us that moment. Peter, take it away.
Allison, I'll tell you first that I learned this week firsthand, non-lethal also means not pleasant. Look at this.
You can't see it, hear it, or smell it, but it makes unruly mobs do this. The Defense Department's active denial system, a non-lethal weapon that can be used to control crowds, secure perimeters, and keep pirates at bay. It could be a game changer.
This is one of the things that we can shoot first and ask questions later. Normally you can't do that.
The military says the active denial system is not radioactive, it's not a microwave, and it's not a laser beam. It's instead a man-sized beam of millimeter waves that can be fired from up to 1,000 meters away that are designed to get the subject, whoever's standing on this X, really, really hot so that they move. And it's about 50 degrees out here right now, but I just felt like it was about 1,000, and I've never been inside a tub that somebody dropped a hairdryer in, but I would imagine that that's what it feels like.
After about 1.5 seconds, 1/64th of an inch of my skin was 130 degrees, but as soon as I stepped away, it was over, and the DoD says there aren't any lingering effects.
There's no cancer risk, there's no risk to a fetus or reproductive capability.
A prototype costs $10 million, and there are no plans to deploy one anytime soon.
At Marine Base Quantico in Virginia, Peter Ducey, Fox News. And we're told that out of 11,000 people they've tested this system out on, they've only had 2 injuries, and those were second-degree burns from overexposure, but that now there are measures in place to avoid injury and keep things both legal and treaty compliant, which is a big concern.
Oh, good. I'm glad they worked out that kink. But, Peter, why didn't you scream? I mean, did you feel like yelling when you were burned like that?
It's one of those things you don't even really have time to scream. It's just with no buildup, every single inch of your skin, with me it was just my torso, is immediately just, they said about 130 degrees with, no warning, just right away. It's like an iron just being pressed right onto you all at once. So before you even have time to scream, you kind of gasp and then your heart starts racing. But then it's done. As soon as you're out of the line of the wave, it's done.
All right, so seeing is believing. But what did you see? You didn't see the frequency waves attack the news reporter, nor any wound indicating there was an attack. What you saw was the reaction or effects of a person who's being attacked. The news reporter couldn't stand the pain for a second. He says it feels like what he'd imagine being in a tub with a hairdryer would feel like. I'd equate that to electrocution. And he says his skin felt like someone pressed an iron against it. Now, keep in mind, these are frequencies being directed from a satellite dish on top of a Hummer. And with modifications, it doesn't take a vehicle to be parked near you to attack you. These frequencies can be projected from miles away and precisely attack individuals based on the selected individual's unique biometric frequency. Every human has one. It's sort of like a fingerprint. This made it very difficult to organize with a credible, unified message. So instead of wasting time arguing with people whose minds are attacked, rendering them incapable of rational thought at times, I decided to take the journey by myself to spread knowledge and warn people about the reality of being attacked with directed energy weapons. I felt sympathy for all victims in these tragedies, those who are attacked with directed energy weapons, and those who are being attacked by innocent victims being tortured with directed energy weapons. I know from experiences of being attacked with this technology that these young men weren't mentally ill, and neither are other citizens complaining about being attacked with this technology. Remember Myron May saying Dr. Robert Duncan shouldn't sleep until this program is completely exposed? Well, I can't sleep either. Let's see what Dr. Duncan says about this to me.
I can find targeted individuals as far as, you're one of the oldest ones. From 1976, there seemed to be a large increase in targeted individuals using this technology. So they're testing these on you. You happen to be a project, and I'm sorry for that.
Excuse me, in your experiences, when they began doing this testing on subjects in the advanced population, who are the people that they first began to target?
Well, originally, and there's a long history of CIA and Army and you name it, they would target the black community, those impoverished, those that had no voice in the community.
So there you have it. I'm not just saying I'm a victim. Dr. Robert Duncan says I'm one of the oldest victims that he knows of. He's not referring to my age. He's talking about the amount of years I've been in this non-consensual human experimentation weapons testing program. As of today, I'm 40 years old, and my experiences began about 37 years ago. Life for me has been more than difficult, but honestly, being a human lab rat for the CIA has given me an appreciation for freedom and life that most people will never have. What does Duncan say about mental illness being associated with these young men complaints?
Their whole thing was mental illness, and gun control.
There's just a way to discredit something that people don't understand. They don't talk about the true motives behind it. They just say, mental illness, too complex for you to know. There are other discrediting words. You can call someone dumb. Don't listen to them. But they're just discrediting words. Listen to the information. Actually get the story and do your research, and then you'll find that there is a whole lot of truth.
I really didn't know what Duncan would say to me during the interview, When he vouched for me as a victim and apologized, I had mixed emotions of appreciation and anger. So, after being vetted as a victim by someone who's helped develop the technology and knows citizens are used as test subjects, I felt empowered and ready to take on the task of seeking adequate help while warning the public about the dangers of this weapon system. Here are the results of my efforts.
A small group of activists is speaking out in support of FSU shooter Myron May.
Their message is so controversial and the issue so sensitive, they were warned to stay off the Florida State campus. WCTV's Eden Schultz joins us with that story. Eden?
Well, friends and family say Myron May was having serious mental problems when he opened fire at FSU's Strozier Library last November. This group says he turned violent because he was what they call a targeted individual being tortured by the government.
Tyrone Dew was stationed outside the FAMU Commons Thursday handing out pamphlets. He says Myron May was targeted by what he calls a government no-touch torture program.
I do not condone the violence. However, I do understand the young man's frustration.
Dew claims he was targeted too. That's why he and a handful of supporters were raising awareness at FAMU.
These weapons are able to simulate hearing a voice in your head and changing your emotion.
Tyrone says it's not mental illness, though he admits he was once in a mental institution. He wanted to demonstrate at Strozier Library, but FSU police denied his request, citing safety concerns and warning he could be arrested if he shows up. Students were mixed about whether the protest should have been allowed.
To me, it wouldn't be the right thing to do to have a protest, but at the same time, you can't really change what people think.
There's no harm in letting those people express what they believe.
The fact that they're supporting this guy who tried to commit such a heinous crime on our community is absolutely ridiculous.
That group of activists also say Aaron Alexis, the Washington Naval Yard shooter, was a targeted individual.
That was a proud moment for me. I made the news raising awareness, but what the news didn't report about the event was this. What I want you to explain to the people is that what Myron May was complaining about, because he said your name several times, these particular technologies that are capable of putting voices into people's heads, what is your knowledge that they are used against American citizens? What is your knowledge of these weapons existing?
Voice of God weapons.
Now, what do you think about these particular technologies being used against American citizens? Are they being used against American citizens to your knowledge, or are they not?
Well, yeah, and fortunately, that's kind of why I became a whistleblower, is that, I felt that I was somewhat responsible since I worked on some of the technologies. But, they lied to me. They lied to everybody. We scientists are just children. We love creating new things, and we see the good in every potential technology that we create. In this case, I saw, I was naive. I saw the evil that was being done, and yes, it is being done to American people. I estimate, other people estimate higher, that about 2,000 people in the United States, 10,000 worldwide. And you got to remember, this is a worldwide issue.
Thanks to Dr. Robert Duncan for his willingness to publicly talk about this crime and not shy away from the truth, no matter how unreal the topic may seem for the public. The truth about this technology being used against citizens and the tragedies resulting from citizens being attacked are like vegetables as a kid. You prefer something sweet, but vegetables are better for you to live a healthier life. I honestly wish more journalists would listen to him and report the truth, or at the very least, challenge the credibility of his expertise and information. Perhaps it'll speed up the process of acquiring help. But, as we all know by now, news stations report whatever they want, with as much or little of the truth being mentioned as news corporations prefer. Even after this, nothing was done to provide help to citizens. And during the time of embassy employees being attacked, another U.S. citizen was attacked, and this is the outcome. Take a look at this.
This, of course, is the case of Daniel Drayton, who was arrested in North Hollywood for allegedly kidnapping, raping, and torturing a woman here after he's accused of murdering a woman in New York. And after this interview, it is clear his mental health will likely be a big part of his defense. Calling himself a good person who heard voices in his head, accused killer and confessed serial killer Daniel Drayton, seen here being taken into custody last week in North Hollywood, spoke from the Men's Central Jail in downtown Los Angeles with the New York Daily News, an interview in which he admitted to killing New York nurse Samantha Stewart. "I really liked her," Drayton told the Daily News. "I didn't want to kill her. They told me she had to die." They would be voices in his head that Drayton went into further detail about. "I'm a passenger in my own body," he repeated over and over. "It's mind control. They use direct energy weapons on me to control my mind." Drayton said he suffered from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and has admitted to several more murders, but police aren't sure whether they actually happened. Authorities were able to track Drayton from New York to L.A., where Drayton said he hoped his crime spree would come to an end. "I wanted to get caught," he said. "I took some of her things with me and used them. I kept my same phone. I knew they could track it. I didn't want anyone else to get hurt." Well, someone had. In North Hollywood, he kidnapped, raped, and strangled another woman, telling the Daily News he thought he had actually killed her until she stirred. He says he considered killing himself, but by then authorities had moved in and placed him under arrest. Now, after twice refusing to leave his jail cell last week to go to court, Drayton was finally arraigned on Monday, during which he pleaded not guilty.
Here's a 26-year-old male named Daniel Drayton, who's saying he's being controlled by directed energy weapons. He repeatedly said he's a passenger in his own body. Now, bipolar and schizophrenia are diagnoses given to anyone who's complained about directed energy weapon attacks. The young man entered a plea of not guilty, and I truly believe he's innocent. Should he or anyone be convicted of a crime when someone else is controlling their body to commit the crime? You might be saying to yourself, it's a bit far-fetched to be controlled with directed energy weapons, and U.S. Embassy employees never mention anything about being controlled. Well, check out this article from GQ magazine, titled "The Mystery of the Immaculate Concussion," dated October 19th, 2020. In this article, it's clearly mentioned that an American diplomat and his spouse were in Philadelphia, and the couple was startled awake by a sound and pressure in their heads. And on the advice of the FBI agents, the family moved to a hotel. And while there, they were again woken in the early morning. Terrified, they ran into the room where their children were sleeping and found them moving bizarrely and in unison. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this means the kids were being controlled, right? Moving bizarrely and in unison. So my question to you is, are you next to be attacked with this technology, causing chaos in your life to the point of being destitute, framed for crimes you're not committing, and considered mentally ill? If you see the importance of raising awareness about directed energy weapon attacks, help me contact Alex Jones, so perhaps we can get a serious conversation started with Congress and Senate to prevent this from happening to you or someone you love. Thanks for watching.